college admissions, ACT, SAT, and CLT podcast for a changing world. I'm Tyler, the founder of Achievable, and most test prep fails because students spend too much time reviewing what they actually know and not enough time on what actually changes scores. Achievable takes a smarter approach to ACT, SAT, and CLT prep, helping students focus their time where it matters most at a fraction of the cost of a tutoring program. You can start with a free trial at achievable.me to see if it's the right fit for you and your child. And if you like it, you can use the code podcast to save 10%. Now, let's get started. Today, we've got Jill Shulman, the author of the book College Essay Confidence, which we're going to be talking about today. And Jill, I'd love if you can introduce yourself and your book and anything else.
Thanks for inviting me here today, Tyler. I have been a college essay coach for decades. Before that, I taught personal writing and all other kinds of writing in colleges. And I come at this from sort of a trifecta of knowledge as a teacher and coach, as a writer myself, and I worked in admissions at a couple of elite colleges as an evaluator. I'm also a parent who's been through the process myself, and my mission in life is helping other parents and students have a less stressful experience when they go through college admissions. That's why I wrote the book College Essay Confidence, which includes both a step by step, really clear process with a sense of humor and also exercises for helping with the emotional piece of this, which is so important. And I also wrote a book for parents, College Admissions Cracked.
Hmm.
And finally, if you need any free resources, you can go to my website, jillshulman.com. I keep adding them every day. I got you.
Great. Yeah, thank you. So excited to talk to you about this. And the first question I have is about confidence. I think the biggest thing that people get worried about with confidence in essays and other places in the application process is sounding like they're bragging, right? So, how
Mm.
do you kind of straddle the line between those two things, like just in general?
I feel like the bigger issue than bragging is I have nothing to say about my normal, boring life. Like,
Right.
worried that they don't have enough to say. And to them, I say, you're special. And I know that because I haven't ever met anyone who isn't. You just have to figure out what makes you special. And that's what the process is all about. But before you can dig in and figure out who you are and what makes you sparkly, you have to have the confidence that you're worthy, that you have a right to write this essay and the world is waiting to hear about you. In terms of the bragging piece, a common bit of advice that adults give students is sell yourself in your essay. And I would say, as somebody who's evaluated thousands of applications, on being on the other side, bragging comes across as, you're arrogant and boastful, which you're not. So it's a tone thing, and it's not great advice. So be
Mhm.
really polite to these loving people who care about you and give you this not great advice, but please try to ignore it.
Yeah. Well, and I think, I mean, what you've been talking about just now kind of makes me think about like the flip side, which it sounds like actually the issue is not that people are too confident, but that, they're not confident enough or that they're kind of fearful or that they don't think that they're measuring up. So, what advice do you have for students that feel that way, right? Or the parents of those students? Like, how do you get them to kind of understand and get into the mindset that's going to help them write an essay that really sells themselves?
Well, the first thing to know is that all that fear is, we all have it. We all have this voice inside our head. I call it the inner troll. And that troll is just telling you how worthless you are, how bad everything is that you write. And tuning it out, like over and over again, is a huge part of the process. So, in because I'm done this for so many years, I know the points of most resistance when that troll voice comes into your head. The big one is getting started. How can anybody be genuine and creative when they've got that voice inside of them, with trash talk and shutting them down? So, getting over that fear is probably a lifelong process, but to get started, you have to get over that fear. And the way to do it is to start writing. Write badly and remember that just any words that you produce are a victory.
Mm,
There's no good or bad writing when it's your first draft or when you're just playing around trying to find topics. No one's ever going to see it. So
mm,
stop thinking of it like this is an important piece of writing, because it's not. The first draft is not your important piece of writing. The
mm.
second draft and the third draft are also pieces of writing that no one will ever see. So you have power where you think you
Mm.
don't. You have power to conquer the inner troll. Just get started. Laugh at the gibberish that comes out. Look for treasures instead of all the rubble within that big pile of words, and keep going.
Yeah, well, and I like the metaphor of like treasure and rubble, but how do you find like what how do you identify it, right? Like from your
Yes.
perspective as an admissions officer, you might be able to say, "Oh yeah, these are, I love like these kind of things." But I think a lot of for obviously for high school students going through this, they have no experience with that. So how do you do that?
Well, it's such a great question, and I really felt a big responsibility with what I chose to put in this book. And a couple of things that I put in this book are basically quizzes, questions that you can ask yourself about what's valuable and what needs work. So the first one of the first exercise is finding treasure, and I give criteria of what treasure is, what it looks like. And the first thing is be generous with yourself. Don't just assume it's all bad or all good. You got to get rid of this black and white thinking. Some of it's going to be like a dud, and some of it is going to be good. And what the first thing to look for is what speaks to you. Like,
Mm,
which parts, as you're reading along, are you skimming? And which parts are like, whoa, that was a cool idea I came up with? Or, hmm, I never thought of things this way until I wrote it down. Or,
mhm,
oh, I never thought of writing about this topic, but hey, that's a cool idea. Let's just see where it leads. So, anything that interests you will probably interest a reader too. And the things that you're excited about, excitement, enthusiasm is contagious. So if you're into it and you write about something that you're into, the reader will feel that enthusiasm too. When you're talking when you're talking to a friend and your friend is super excited about something that you could not have cared less about 5 minutes ago, but they're so
mm.
into it that kind of gets you pumped up, and you're like, maybe I will try watercolor painting. That sounds really cool the way he described it. That's what we're going for.
Yeah, and I think I mean that kind of what you're touching on is a little bit like what you said earlier too, where the a lot of the kids that you work with are like, I've never had anything interesting happen to me,
Yeah.
right? Like, I feel like that's a matter of perspective, and that you can, I mean, hopefully, part of becoming confident in your writing is also being confident in your story.
And during the writing process, this is one of the moments in the whole college admission process that gives an opportunity for some real meaning. And during the writing process, in addition to sharing a surface story, there's another piece of it, which is what is this essay really about? And in order to find that deeper level of meaning, what does it say about me? And how can I share something with you that you're not going to know from all the data in my application? I tell a story in my book about this student. I called her Melanie. That's not her real name, but she was a real student. And she said, I have nothing interesting to say about my life. And then she pulled out her water bottle. And on
Mhm.
that water bottle were the whole thing was covered with stickers. And it was like, ski Utah and the outdoor nature is my religion and cross country, her high school cross country team and, like a camp that she went to. And I'm like, whoa, hold up. I'm interested in all these things. To you, it's just this really mundane thing that happens to you. To me, these are like things you're choosing to put on your water bottle that are meaningful to you. So I want to hear about them. So you're right that changing perspective, a huge part of it is saying, okay, I didn't win an Olympic gold and I didn't, start a new company, but I went on this life altering journey when I tore my ACL. you know,
Mhm.
Little moments that made a big impact on you is what we're looking for, not the end all be all achievement or topic.
Yeah. No, that makes a ton of sense. And I think that it's also kind of like it's related to confidence in the sense that essentially the confidence helps you understand that what you're doing is cool and interesting,
Hmm.
right? And not just kind of like you said, mundane or even kind of weird or losery, right? Like you might be like, wow, like, I spend a lot of time in the robotics lab and that makes me kind of weird. But actually that's totally a thing you should write about in your essay, right? And that's really interesting. So
Totally. If you're in the
yeah,
robotics lab all the time, you're living there, you love it, I'm going to be into robotics when I read your essay, and I am not right this minute. So it's
right.
true.
Well, and I think it kind of leads to this idea of like confidence helps you go from like a vague kind of generic story to a more directed and interesting story, right? When you're confident that what you're talking about is interesting. Do you agree with that?
I do. And the other thing that can lead to very generic stories, the most common mistake that students make in is to write about a topic that is so broad that almost anybody could write about it. So, another example in the book is one of my students was really into art and she wanted to write about art. And I'm like, okay. So anybody on this green earth who like loves to paint, draw, sculpt, go to an art museum and appreciate art could write about art. So let's get more specific with this. And we
Mm.
kept shrinking the topic down. It got to painting. Then we shrunk it down, portrait painting, because she was a people person. She loved being in the art room, but she loved collaborating and connecting with people. And in the end, the story came from just one painting that she painted, a little girl in an orphanage in Kenya. She was painting it as part of this service organization that she was doing, and it combined painting with her being this person who cared so much about personal connection with a person who had this other interest, which is like building community, worldwide community through volunteer work. So even,
Yeah.
by shrinking down the topic, you have way more to write about.
Right. Well, and it's way more unique and interesting, right? I think that
Yes.
that's one of the biggest problems is kind of I think a lot of students try to like write about what they think the college admissions officer wants, but what the college admissions college admissions officer actually wants is to learn about you and who, like, what makes you tick, really, right? So it really kind
Yes.
of will backfire if you just try to, I don't know, like, write about how great your grades are and how you're the president of like student council or whatever. Those are great things, but it's not like your unique story that makes you stand out.
Yeah, they'll learn about that in your in your activities portion of your application where it's appropriate to brag and you should go for it in that section. But in a college admissions essay, in the personal essay, it comes across as pandering.
Mm.
And what if you can say what you want to say instead of what you think others want to hear and what colleges want to hear, then it builds confidence. And the punchline is what you want to say is what colleges want to hear.
Right. And it's like much more, I don't know, authentic. Like I
Yes,
think that at the end of the day, that's what colleges really want is they want like your authentic voice. And I feel like confidence is a key piece of finding that for yourself.
it's so true. And in order to be authentic, yeah, you first have to get the confidence up to figure out who you are and what you want to say, which is no easy feat. Again, in the book, I ask questions to try to dive deep into these more abstract philosophical pieces of you, questions that other people, like people don't ask teenagers. Like, who are you? Who are you becoming? Who do you want to become? How is college going to help you get there? How are activities or whatever you're choosing to spend your time on helping you now? How has it formed barriers for you? And what are you going to do about it in the future? Are you going to continue it in the next step of your life or are you going to stop? But being so the point of the essay is for the human being behind all the numbers and grades and what other people say about him to pop into three dimensions so that the reader, the evaluator, can see a human being walking around the campus and adding to the fabric of the institution, both in the classroom and extracurricularly. That's what we want. We want to present a human being and not just another laundry list of activities or achievements.
Yeah, and I think that that also is something that if you are just trying to present a laundry list or if you're not being authentic, I feel like admissions officers can really tell, right? I mean, like, what are the big tells on whether someone's being authentic or not in their essay?
Well, one tell of adult influence on the essay is resume words. Like, if you've never used the word facilitate in a sentence, don't put it in your personal essay. It's just this kind of stilted, unnatural language. You should write basically like you talk and then later polish it up. But I think, writing a 5 paragraph essay that you learn to do in English class doesn't work out great for a college essay. That final paragraph, when you are repeating what you already say in slightly different words, in a personal essay is just repetitive. Like, yeah, we already know that. Why are you telling me that? So, a couple of, those things are about trying to please, trying to write the way others want you to write instead of writing more like you'd be writing in a journal essay. I mean, in a journal entry and saying what you want to say. And then there's the problem of oversharing. When you're writing about a big breakup with a significant other, and it's like, whoa, this isn't really what I'm after in the essay. I have a questionnaire for that, which doesn't come into play until after you've written and after you've found the gems that you think are important. Then only in the third draft do you get your inner editor, never the inner troll. The inner troll should be banished for a lifetime, but your inner
Mm,
editor can help you try to get in the mindset of the reader and say, whoa, if I was reading that, would I feel a little squirmy? Did
mm.
I write about something that like may or may not be totally legal? You know, like online betting, like sports betting? Did I say something that might be kind of concerning that maybe the college doesn't feel like they have the support for me when you go really far with the mental health piece? So these are the kinds of things that make me feel like you haven't really thought about who you are as a whole person. And instead of like, yeah, I'm an anxious person, or yeah, my mom thinks I should write about this, or I need to make it perfect for college admissions officers to see. So, I write, as per my last paragraph, those kinds of
Right.
things.
Yeah, well, and I think that actually you brought up a couple different things I want to follow up on. The first is about just like showing vulnerability, right? Like
Mm,
based on what you just said, and I imagine, especially if you're helping kids from the beginning, you might read some essays that are just like here's my entire diary, right? And that obviously is not what is going to
yeah.
be most effective for getting you into college. But on the other hand, obviously some of the most powerful essays involve vulnerability, right? And so how do you help students kind of navigate that, where it's like you should be
Mm.
open and vulnerable, but in the ways that make sense in the context?
I love this question. And the common application, which is the application that most students will fill out, has a battery of, you can choose among 7 topics. The
Mhm.
last one is write about anything you want, topic of your choice, which makes all the others obsolete if they don't speak to you, but can help a lot of people get started. When you look at those topics, you'll see they aren't asking you for a failure or something that made you feel horrible. They're asking you, what did you do with that experience? How did you overcome it? Or how are you working on overcoming it if it's a work in progress? What did you learn from it? And how have you applied the takeaway to other pieces of your life? It's a proportion thing, Tyler. So if you want to say, I struggled with anxiety, and then here is what I did, and here's how I have applied what I've learned to the pieces of my life that are important to me, spend no more than a third of the essay on the anxiety itself. That's not what the reader wants to know about you. What they want to know, the story here is your resilience and how you handled it. And even if you handled it poorly, but learned from it, what did you learn from it and how are you going to apply it, in college? So I really think vulnerability is very appealing in a person. The bragging sounds like pandering and boastful and arrogance. The vulnerability sounds real because real people are reading your essay, and those people have vulnerabilities too. It helps with connection. But dwelling on that vulnerability it can start to sound a little whiny and not as compelling as, okay, this is me, warts and all, and this is what I've done about it so far. And this is the lesson that I learned from it.
Right. Well, and yeah, that also connects to the other topic that I wanted to touch on from earlier that you've talked about, which is like the editing process, right?
Mm,
I definitely agree with you that like parents can come in and edit the essay to sound like a resume or sound like, not like the authentic teenage voice anymore, right? Like, and make
hmm
it kind of too polished and professional. So how do you do that, right? Like like, because at the end of the day, it kind of has to be up to the student, the child, to manage their own essay writing process and be the
hmm
final say on it, or at least it should be, or else we're going to get something is that is sounding like a resume, right?
Yeah.
So they really like, what advice do you have for both the parents and the children on how to handle the editing process and keeping the authentic voice?
So on my website, go to resources at jillshulman.com, and I've got a list of guidelines for parents about what to do when your kid hands you an essay. And I also have a list of guidelines that students can print out and give to their readers so that they will get helpful rather than, confidence busting advice. So, the first thing to know about editing is not just proofreading. Those lists and all of that comes at the very end after they've gone through drafts. And I know many a junior and senior in high school who has never really understood exactly what does revision mean. Like,
Mm.
I know I'm supposed to correct commas, but what else am I supposed to do to revise an essay? And I've done okay so far with just like, writing something at the last minute and turning it in. Why shouldn't I do that now? And the answer is the evaluators will know. It will not reflect well on you. And so you are worth the investment of going through drafts. But how do I do that? Is like the next question. So in the book, I go through 4 drafts. Those 4 drafts can really be as many as you want, but I split it
Yeah,
up
yeah.
that way. And the way that I encourage students to do it is first blurt out a hot mess. No strings attached to make this beautiful. This is not your college essay. This is just words that will lead to other words that will lead to your college essay. So taking the stakes off builds confidence so that they can just go, go, go. Nobody ever has to see it.
Mm.
The first editing step is this. That's also the scariest. I mean, getting started usually is the scariest. The second scariest is making the transition from being the creator to the revision process.
Mm.
What if I like it? I don't want to touch it. Or I hate everything. This is horrible. I need to start over again. So stepping back, having some perspective. Yeah, some of it's going to not work out, and some of it is going to be worthy. So give it a chance. Find the gems. That's the first step. And then look at the big picture. Moving big chunks of words, removing big chunks of words, adding stuff that you didn't really get to that maybe you skimmed over but you want to add more, substituting more specific ideas for the vague and general ones that were repetitive or whatever in the first draft. Then in the next draft, you get smaller to
Mm.
sentence level revisions. That's when you get to play and make it prettier. And in that part, you can decorate your essay with transitions to smooth it out. And you have to sometimes be really ruthless and kill your darlings, is a writer's phrase, stuff that you might have liked, but it doesn't serve your purpose anymore. And finally, during that second and third draft, start thinking about what your essay is really about, really saying about you. And that part is like a four draft process and really a lifetime process. But in the course of this, really, just reflecting on your topic with some depth is something that will help the readers connect with you. And it will show that your true intellectual capacity, that you can succeed in college. And then finally, we get to the proofreading piece, which
Mhm.
is where a lot of parents come in. I would advise students to wait until that piece. And then we're talking small brushstrokes. We're talking, and you do need readers. You do. I mean, readers can catch things like that something maybe that you put in there that you unintentionally put in there that was offensive or could be offensive to someone. Like, you didn't mean to be offensive, but your reader will say, "Ooh,
Mhm.
somebody who's reading this could be offended by this." And they can catch, I mean, bonus, they can help you catch all the typos. And if you have more than one reader, you can compare notes. And if more than one reader has pointed to the same part of the essay as, "I don't really get this," then you know that that's a worthwhile thing to work on. If the reader is overly critical, you have the power to say, I don't, I think it's
Mhm.
okay the way it is. I don't think they got me, but I'm not going to use their advice. That's legit too. So at the very end, and also in the book, I made, how to receive feedback with to make it productive rather than to make it devastating is another piece of the emotional pie with, getting like showing this thing that you've worked so much on to like presenting it to the outside world is scary. So, yeah.
Yeah, well, and as a part of that process, I heard you basically do like sort of subtly including a lot of ways to like build up the child's confidence, right?
Mhm.
And so I think, the exercise of just put it all out on paper, no one's going to see it, like can help them build confidence, for instance. Do you have other exercises that you recommend for people that are feeling stuck or that they don't feel like their writing has a confident voice?
I have at least one brain booster, I call it, in every section of this book. And they come from psychology, mindfulness, science, from every direction, so that if you're into meditation, we got meditations. If you are so not into meditation and find that whole mindfulness really woo woo, then we
Hmm.
got scientifically proven. So, one method that a lot of people use, oh, and they all take like 1 minute. So,
Hmm.
one is power pose. Amy Cuddy, who's a Harvard professor, wrote a whole book on how physically making a power pose. I mean, we're talking about taking up a ton of space, standing in superhero position, cape fluttering, arms on your hips. I am going to rule this goes a long way into feeling it inside in your bones. Another way to make a quick perspective shift: anxiety and excitement are both arousal emotions. This is a scientific one. They both have the same side effects, the pounding heart, the sweating, the sweaty palms, all of that.
Hmm.
But anxiety has a negative connotation. It can bring you down. So if you're anxious about writing your essay, that is, breeding ground for your inner troll to come out and say, "Yeah, you can't do this. You're not
Hmm.
worthy." Whereas if you can flip it in your mind to, "I'm excited," even say it out loud, "I'm excited," it's a close cousin on the emotional spectrum, but it's a positive emotion that helps you move forward.
Yeah.
These kinds of little tiny perspective shifts help a ton.
Yeah, that's great. And I mean, I think that, to kind of wrap this up, at the end of the day, these are skills that you're going to use for the rest of your life, both with, being confident about something you don't really understand and also writing, which is a pretty important thing. Pretty
For
much everyone
sure.
writes all the time. But I think the confidence piece is even more important, right? And I think it can help them benefit these students in college and beyond.
Well, I do want to say that a lot of my students have revised their college list based on what they learned from really thinking about the kinds of things you need to think about to write a knockout essay. You know,
Mhm.
who am I? Who am I becoming? How am I going to convey that in
Mhm.
writing? And what college is going to help me become more myself? What college offers the kinds of things that, really make me feel like my best self? And so some students who thought they wanted to go to a huge university are like, whoa, I'm digging the idea of having small classroom conversations. And now I feel better about my writing. I want to go to a small liberal arts college and vice versa. So I think that building confidence through this exercise, like I said, it's an opportunity to rewrite the story that everyone's always told about you or that you've always told yourself, and then make that your story, own it, and move forward with that.
Yeah, yeah, that's great. I really think that's a good thing to kind of like close on. And do you have any other comments before we wrap up?
No, I want parents and students to steal freely from my website, which has all
Mm.
these free resources. And I just really hope that these books will help tamp things down for families and to tamp it down with no shame.
Mhm.
I don't want people to feel ashamed about the way they're feeling. I want to give them tools to do something about it moving forward.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. This has been Shift, a college admissions podcast for a changing world, hosted by Tyler from Achievable with Jill Shulman, author of the book College Essay Confidence. And you can get a free trial of Achievable's ACT, SAT, or CLT courses by going to achievable.me.